Well, we're going to continue the conversation here with Shayne. We got Glenn Irby coming on at 8 o'clock, but I want to talk to him about kind of that culture versus talent thing that we were talking about. And I also am curious if he's had any experiences in Philadelphia, because that's notoriously a tough place to play with that fan base here. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Yeah, Shayne, I was curious about this because we talked about this. We did a little bit. Obviously, we focus on the local sports for the most part, but we wanted to do a Super Bowl preview. So we talked about this when we talked about the Eagles and the Chiefs, that there were kind of two different themes there. It seemed like everything with the Chiefs was very Taylor Swift oriented because she brings a lot of attention to the game. And then with the Eagles, it just makes me think of all these things. I heard Big G mention it when I was walking out of the studio, but they booed Santa Claus. They've thrown, I think they've thrown snowballs at Santa Claus too. They've thrown batteries at players. This is not exclusive to that city. There's good and bad fans in every city, but I'm curious if you have any Philadelphia stories, or if there's a certain city that sticks out to you playing in where it's like, this is going to be kind of a rough day as an opposing kicker that's on the sideline a lot and hearing from fans.
Yeah, so on the sidelines, I heard things from fans nonstop, all away games, because I was right there in the net, kind of right close to the edge of the bleachers. So I kind of became immune to that, and so every now and then they could actually be funny, and it was actually entertaining, and sometimes they would actually be really supportive. It was really weird. Because of the fantasy football thing, that sometimes played into it. But if I'm looking at a memory in Philadelphia, it would be the 2013 season. I was the kicker for the Saints, and we played Philadelphia in the playoffs. And it was the first time the Saints were going to play or had not won an outdoor game under a certain temperature in the playoffs, blah, blah, blah. I ended up kicking 4 field goals and a game winner on the last play of the game to advance to the next round. And it was kind of a big deal because, they were like, they're not going to beat them in Philadelphia, in the cold weather, all of that. But our head coach decided to put bullseyes on the side of our bus because I guess there's a tendency for fans to throw things at the opposing team's bus.
Okay.
So not only did he put a bullseye on the side of the bus, he told the bus to take an extra lap around the parking lot through the tailgates to egg them on. So you can imagine how fun that was to have things banging up against the side of the bus because we had this vinyl bullseye, vinyl wrapped on the side of our bus.
Well, I'm curious. Okay, so you said egged them on. I'm curious what the actual items were that people were throwing. I can't imagine they probably had access to eggs. People probably weren't carrying eggs. That's why they had the batteries, because it was like an insert in one of the giveaways, and so they were throwing those batteries the one game. But what were they throwing at the bullseyes here?
The thing you're going to see the most are the beer bottles, the airplane bottles of liquor. You'd hate to see them actually throw a pint or a fifth or something like that because that could potentially bust a window. But, we had, full cups of beer, beer bottles and little bottles, I'm sure batteries, footballs that the kids were playing with in the parking lot, pieces of pizza, hot dogs, you name it, it was thrown against that bus. And I think Sean Payton did it just to quote unquote egg them on a little bit.
I was thinking that was a Sean Payton move. Big G, you're a big wrestling fan. That makes me think of the old days of the WCW and NWO where they were just cascading the ring with sodas and food and all of that.
Oh yeah, when Hulk Hogan had his heel turn, that was you've never seen as much thrown into a ring. It was crazy.
Sean Payton probably is a wrestling fan. I feel like he's got the temperament for it.
He seems like a guy that probably could. Yeah.
That's interesting though that he because that's not a fan base that I get it because it's a big victory. I don't know if that's the fan base I would want to provoke. It's like, okay, we got everybody out of here healthy. We didn't have any equipment damaged. We didn't have any players damaged because that's been a threat at times with these the batteries and the different things that have been thrown. I mean, you get injured on the sidelines there. So, but he was, I guess, once you guys were in the bus, he said, okay, this bus is fortified. Hopefully it was fortified for those items there.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's almost like you have a lot of keyboard warriors that talk real tough on the internet because they're protected by, fiber optics and
Right.
and miles and miles of separation. I think the head coach probably thinks we've got a police escort. We've got all these, biker cops beside of us. We've got all the other, police cars clearing the traffic. They're not going to get too crazy. I guess we got lucky because we didn't have anything shatter a window.
Well, and you do have, because that's a good point about, you got keyboard warriors, you got people that are big behind a screen or whatever, but you got to be careful if you're a fan. But it's a weird dynamic because it's like the guys on that team, whether you're talking about the linemen that could come off that bus and squash all these fans that are out there that are drunk.
Too, yeah.
There's that, but you also don't want them coming off the bus because then they're out in the public with the potential to get hurt. So that's interesting. Yeah, the Philadelphia fan base has always been one of the most unique. They're very passionate. I was going to tell this quote to Glenn Irby, but this was circulating around in anticipation of this game because there was a famous Mike Schmidt quote that was, Philadelphia is the only city where you can experience the thrill of victory and the agony of reading about it the next day. I feel like that's a good summary of Philadelphia fanhood there.
Yeah, well, and just another reference, Billy Wagner is a good friend of mine who was a closer in the major leagues for a long time, played in Philadelphia, and he was telling me a story about how he got booed when he struck out someone when he played for Philly because he had thrown his first pitch at 101 or 100. He threw his second pitch at 100, and then he threw the third one at 99, and they booed him because he registered under 100 miles an hour in his own strikeout. And he was like, I've never experienced a fan base that would boo their own team for not doing as well as they expected you to do, but still winning the play.
He achieved what he needed to achieve on that play. Yes. He got the strikeout. What does it matter if he threw a pitch in the dirt and it was 80 miles per hour and it got a strikeout? It doesn't matter. That's funny. But that, I feel like that does epitomize the fan base and that team as a whole, because the team even is embodying that a little bit. We were talking about the culture versus talent thing, but Detroit, yeah, they've kind of trademarked the grit phrase, but Detroit is a gritty city. You played in all the markets, all the teams, all the areas, and I'm sure you saw the differences in the cities when you went there, and Detroit is naturally a gritty city, so the team tends to embody that, and when they're good, they're gritty. They wouldn't be able to compose a high-talent team like a Philadelphia and then deal with all those egos. That typically doesn't work for them, whereas Philadelphia, their fan base is a little bit more high anxiety, and so for whatever reason, then that ends up happening with these teams, because the Phillies are even that way now. They have a lot of talent, but you don't know what's going to happen on the field. It's just interesting how the culture of the city embodies the team and vice versa.
Well, and I think when you have a city that has the history that Detroit has, I think the coach knows, like, we need to embrace this. And sometimes you have, how do you tell your team in Vegas to be gritty, right? Like, you just, everything is glitz and glam and all that. It would be hard to do, but in Detroit, it's a very easy thing. I know that's something we tried to do in Cincinnati. Other places I've been, they play that card. And I think every city can probably try to tell you some part of their history when they had it tough and the city pulled together and 9/11 in New York and all those type of things. They try to pull from the culture of locality, but does the team buy into it? And I think the good coaches are the ones that know how to persuade players to buy into it. And one thing that I learned as a coach is that I have to create my ideas that I want the coach to buy into, almost like it's his idea, so that he came up with it, even though I thought about it. So that's what good coaches can do. And I'm not saying I was good, but that's something I learned from the other coaches, is even your players. The good coaches can get their players to have so much conviction in it that they almost think it's their idea to do what they're going to do.
That's a life lesson right there, because I feel like that's true for a lot of people. They have to kind of think it's their own idea to embrace it sometimes. And that was a common theme for the Rust Belt teams and the Midwest teams. Cincinnati is kind of more in the Rust Belt, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. What do you got, Big G? You got something over there?
Yeah, I know we got to go to break real quick, but Shayne, what do you think? What do you think? Do you think that Dan Campbell actually having played for Detroit had something to do with the fact that he wanted to make the players buy in? Look, I've been here. It's not as bad as what the media makes out. It's not as bad as what, outsiders make it out to be. Do you think that has anything to do with that?
I think it absolutely does. Because, when we all want to take advice from someone, we all want to know that the advice we're taking is someone who experienced it and went through it. And, unfortunately, sometimes as children, we feel like our parents never went through it, but they did. But when it comes to respecting your coach and respecting the authority and what he's doing as far as decision making, I think knowing that he went through it and him being able to experience some downtimes and when things were really tough around here, I think the players can really identify with what he's saying, and I think that definitely gives him an advantage of being somewhat, local hometown type of entity that can say, guys, I sat in the seats you're in. I've gone through this, so let me tell you this, or blah, blah, blah. I think that definitely gives him a lot more credibility.
He's got the right combination of strength and smarts to pull that off, in addition to his history, like you said, Shayne. So, yeah, interesting discussion. We're going to bring Glenn Irby on after the break and talk some Eagles and get his perspective, because I'm curious what he sees as a writer, too, because I have to imagine he hears, because the sports radio landscape and journalism landscape is a lot different in Philadelphia as a result of the fans there. So we're going to bring him on after the break. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM.